They thought they could push me out with noise. It happened on the front porch of my grandfather's house, the same porch where he used to raise the flag at dawn. My cousin Evan pulled up with a moving truck, a locksmith, and two of his buddies. He didn't knock. He didn't ask. He just pointed at me, standing in the doorway, and said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "You're out by sundown. This place is mine now." The locksmith's tools clinked against the metal box. Heat shimmered off the asphalt, cicadas buzzing in the trees. The smell of hot pine and cut grass filled the air, mixing with the oily tang of the truck's engine. I could feel every eye on the block watching, curtains pulled back, whispers carrying. Evan grinned, already savoring victory. He thought his swagger was enough, that his laugh and his volume could erase months of caregiving and years of discipline. What he didn't see was the manila envelope in my hand, edges worn, seal crisp, certified by the county recorder. Inside was the one artifact he hadn't counted on, a deed with my name stamped across it. And when the patrol car rolled up, when the officer asked who held title that day, it wasn't Evan's noise that answered. It was paper. What happened next silenced the block and ended his claims in one sentence. So tell me, what would you do if family tried to bully you out of your own home? Drop your answer in the comments, hit like and subscribe for more echoes of revenge. I didn't plan on moving back into my grandfather's house. At 29, I thought my days of small-town porches and nosy neighbors were long behind me. But after his fall, one slip in the garage that left him with a fractured hip, the doctors made it clear he couldn't live alone anymore. Someone had to step up, and since I was between duty rotations as a reservist, I did what we're trained to do. I assessed the mission, accepted it, and moved in. The house wasn't big, just a single-story bungalow built in the late 50s on a quiet street a few miles from the river. A flagpole stood out front, the stars and stripes still raised every morning and lowered every evening, rain or shine. Grandpa was a Navy machinist during Vietnam. Even decades later, he treated his home like a ship. Tools hung in perfect alignment on the garage wall, lawn mowed in straight, crisp lines, bills paid with check numbers logged neatly in a ledger. He believed in order. He believed in records. Living there meant adopting his rhythm. Breakfast was at 7 sharp, always with black coffee and toast. Mail sorted at 11. The news at 5. He never told long stories about the Navy, but I noticed he saved every certificate, every worn personnel file, every single discharge paper. To him, paperwork wasn't just paper, it was proof. Proof of service, proof of sacrifice, proof of belonging, which is why I knew deep down that the trouble with my cousin Evan wasn't going to be decided with words. It was going to come down to proof. Evan floated in and out of the family orbit like a weather system, loud when he wanted attention, gone when responsibility called. He had a gift for making people laugh at barbecues, for spinning big plans that sounded impressive, until you noticed they never happened. A self-proclaimed handyman, who never finished a job, a born salesman without a product, and yet for reasons I could never fully untangle, my aunt and uncle and sometimes even my parents, treated him like the family's future. At family gatherings they'd point to him and say, "Evan's going places," while I sat there in uniform, silently running through another deployment checklist in my head. He'd clap me on the back and joke, "Hey, you're the soldier, I'm just the civilian contractor." Everybody laughed. I didn't. When I moved in with Grandpa, Evan started showing up more often. Sometimes he'd knock, sometimes he wouldn't. He'd wander the halls like he owned the place, tapping on the walls, running his hand along the banister, making offhand comments. "These floors could use a refinish. Easy weekend job for me. You know, this basement could be a great Airbnb. Guess I'll have to clear out some of this old furniture when I'm living here full time." I said nothing. That was my habit, to observe, to log, to know. Years of intel work had trained me not to waste energy arguing with noise. You just record the pattern, wait for the moment it matters. Grandpa noticed too. He wasn't a fool. He'd lean on his cane, watching Evan's performances with the faintest trace of a smirk, and then later, when it was just the two of us, he'd mutter, "A house belongs to the one who shows up, not the one who shows off." One evening, after Evan left, Grandpa called me into his desk. He was sitting at his old oak desk, the one scarred from decades of use, with a blue folder open in front of him. Inside were neatly clipped documents, each stamped, notarized, dated. He tapped the folder with one finger. "I don't like fights," he said quietly. "I like paperwork. Paperwork doesn't shout. Paperwork doesn't argue. It just stands there and tells the truth." I nodded. I didn't ask questions. I knew better, but I understood the message. Preparation was already underway. Still, at dinners with the larger family, the imbalance continued. Evan was the man of the house in waiting, the one who would carry on Grandpa's legacy. I was the caretaker, the placeholder, the temporary tenant. Once, when I set Grandpa's pillbox on the table before dessert, Evan chuckled and said, "Look at you, Sergeant of Supplement." Everyone laughed, everyone except Grandpa. He just shook his head slowly and whispered to me later, "Keep the blue folder safe." That's when I realized, this wasn't just about family politics. It was a test of discipline, of patience, of who understood that in the end, authority isn't earned by shouting the loudest, it's earned by who holds the paper that matters. Evan never came at you head on, he preferred 1,000 little cuts, each one dressed as a joke. It started small. A measuring tape flicked open in the living room, his voice rising just loud enough for Grandpa to hear. "Knock out this wall and you could double the square footage. Once I'm settled in, I'll make it right." He said it casually, like the decision was already made. Grandpa raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I noted the date, the time, the exact words. Old habits die hard, Intel officers logged data. By the third week, Evan had begun to show up with company, a buddy with a tool belt, another with a truck. They'd stand on the porch and talk about renovation budgets, never once asking me if they were welcome. More than once I caught the smell of beer on their breath, as they left, laughing about the soldiers squatting in the guest room. At a family barbecue, he made his first public announcement. Paper plates in hand, relatives gathered under the shade of a pop-up tent. He raised his plastic cup like a toast. "Big changes coming. Grandpa's place is getting a remodel once I move in." The aunts clapped politely. Someone said, "About time this old place gets a fresh look." My face gave nothing away. Grandpa's didn't either. He just sipped his sweet tea, jaw tight, but I caught the flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Later that night, as we cleared dishes, he muttered, "A remodel's easy to say, it's the taxes and upkeep that count." He didn't say more, but he didn't have to. Evan's confidence grew with each unchecked jab. One evening he swaggered into the kitchen, saw me reviewing Grandpa's medication log, and smirked. "Sergeant of Supplements reporting for duty again?" I didn't answer. I logged it, mentally, the way you record troop movements on a map. Frequency, tone, context, patterns reveal intent. Behind the scenes, Grandpa had already begun preparing. I drove him to the attorney's office downtown, an old brick building with the scales of justice carved into the lintel. Inside, the lawyer explained the options: wills, joint tenancy, transfer on death deeds. She spoke slowly, clearly, laying out the differences between intent and enforceability. "People argue about wills," she said, sliding a thick statute book across the desk. "Courts can take years to sort them out, but a recorded deed, that's not a debate, that's ownership." Grandpa nodded. "I like paperwork," he said, and his weathered hand tapped the folder in his lap. From that day on, the process was precise. The deed drafted, notarized, signed in duplicate, witnesses present, seal embossed. I remember the smell of the notary's ink pad, the sharp snap of the stamp on paper, then the trip to the county recorder's office, metal detectors, government counters, the rhythmic thud of date stamps marking time, document number, book and page, officially indexed, a paper trail no amount of shouting could erase. Back at the house, I tucked the certified copy into a fireproof lockbox under Grandpa's bed. He watched me close the lid, then said softly, "If folks turn noisy, that's the page you open." Meanwhile, Evan was busy fueling the noise. He posted on social media, a selfie with Grandpa on the porch captioned, "Future home sweet home." The comments filled with family friends congratulating him, liking, sharing. Not once did he mention me. Neighbors began to ask subtle questions too. "So are you staying long term? Or just until your cousin takes over?" Their tone was sympathetic, but their eyes carried the same doubt. Through it all, I stayed silent. That's the discipline you learn in the Corps. Don't waste ammo on skirmishes when the real battle is coming. One evening, Grandpa looked especially tired after Evan left. I helped him into bed, checked his oxygen, and sat quietly as he drifted to sleep. Before he closed his eyes, he said one more thing. "A house isn't won by volume, it's held by proof. Remember that." His words stayed with me, because I knew the escalation wasn't over. Evan had shifted from jokes to plans, from comments to public claims. The next step would be pressure, loud, direct, maybe even physical, and when it came, I would be ready. The call came just after dawn. Grandpa had been taken to the hospital overnight. A stroke, they said. By the time I arrived, he was already gone. For a man who had built his life around routines, flags raised at 0700, tools hung at right angles, his final departure was sudden, almost jarring. I stood in the quiet hospital room beside his bed, watching the monitor flatline, and felt the strange stillness that comes when the mission you've lived inside suddenly ends. There wasn't time to grieve, the duties were immediate. I pulled the folder he had prepared months earlier, discharge papers, insurance forms, the VA burial benefits application, each document crisp, signed, ready. Even at the end, he had set the table for order. I organized the military honors with the funeral director, submitted the DD-21 form, and selected the simple flag-draped casket he'd asked for. No gold trim, he had once told me, just the cloth I served on. The funeral was held under a clear sky, the flag snapping in the wind as the bugler played taps. The crack of the rifle salute echoed across the cemetery, each shot like punctuation. Family gathered in rows of folding chairs, dabbing eyes, whispering condolence. Evan sat near the front, dark sunglasses on, arm draped lazily over the chair beside him, as though he were already the host of the day. After the service, while I was still speaking quietly with the honor guard, Evan began to circulate. I heard his voice carry over the low murmur of relatives. "Yeah, I'll be taking care of the house now. Grandpa wanted me to keep it in the family, you know. Fix it up, maybe sell it later." He said it with such authority that people nodded, accepted it as fact. A few even congratulated him. I caught a cousin whispering, "Good thing Evan's stepping up, since she can't stay there forever." I didn't correct them. Not yet. At the reception afterward, Evan made his first move. He cornered me by the buffet table, a plate of chicken salad in his hand, and leaned in with a smirk. "You'll need to pack up soon. I've got plans. Don't worry, I'll let you keep the garage for a while." I looked at him, calm, silent, and then I walked away. That evening, a message pinged on my phone, a group text from Evan to the family. "Moving into Grandpa's place next week. Need a hand clearing out old stuff. Bring boxes." Attached was a photo himself on the porch, keys dangling from his fingers like trophies. I stared at the image for a long moment, then typed a single reply, "Please coordinate through council." No exclamation marks, no emotion, just fact. The silence that followed was heavy. No one else in the family replied. 2 days later, my Ring doorbell camera buzzed. The screen showed Evan standing on the porch with a locksmith. The man carried a kit, tools jangling, the timestamp read I stepped outside, uniform neat, folder in hand. Evan's smile faltered when he saw me. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he said. "You knew this was coming." I didn't argue. I simply raised my phone, snapping a clear photo of the locksmith's van, license plate visible. "Civil standby is on the way," I said evenly. "No lock gets changed until law enforcement is present." The locksmith shifted uneasily, eyes flicking between us. Evan swore under his breath. It was the moment I had anticipated, the break point where the games and jokes hardened into a real attempt. He wasn't just mocking anymore, he was trying to erase me by force. What he didn't understand was that the deed in my folder was more powerful than any shove, more permanent than any shouted claim, and when the uniformed officers arrived to keep the peace, the real reversal would begin. For now I stood on the porch in silence, the envelope heavy in my hand. Let him laugh, let him threaten. Proof, not noise, would decide who belonged in that house. The squad car pulled up slow, tires crunching on the gravel. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, vests snug over their blues, hands resting easy on their belts. Not hostile, not friendly, neutral. Their presence was procedure, nothing more. Evan straightened up, immediately, shoulders back, voice louder. He jabbed a thumb at me. "She's not supposed to be here. My grandfather left me this place. I've got a locksmith ready to change the locks." The lead officer glanced at me. "Ma'am, can I see some ID?" I handed it over without a word, then reached into the folder I'd carried from the beginning. Inside was the artifact, the proof, a certified copy of the transfer on death deed, neatly stamped and indexed by the county recorder's office. The page bore the weight of authority, document number, book and page reference, recording date and time, embossed seal. I slid it forward carefully, not dramatic, just calm. This deed was recorded before my grandfather's passing, property ownership transferred automatically. Here's the certified copy. You can confirm with the recorder's office. Parcel numbers right there. The officer adjusted his sunglasses, scanned the page, then nodded slowly. "So you're on title as of the date of death?" "Yes, sir." Evan laughed sharply, the kind of laugh people use when they're cornered but don't want to admit it. He waved a folded sheet of paper in the air. "I've got something too. Grandpa wrote down he wanted me to have the house. It's right here," his word. The officer took the paper, glanced over it, then handed it back. "Unshade draft. No notary. That's not legally binding." His voice stayed flat, but the words cut through like a blade. Evan's face flushed. "So what? You're just gonna take her side? This is my house." The officer held up a hand. "We're not taking sides. We're here to prevent a breach of the peace, and as of right now, she has lawful possession, without a court order. You don't change those locks. He turned to the locksmith. Pack it up. The man hesitated, tools dangling at his side. Evan spun on him. Don't listen to them. Just do it. I'll pay double. The locksmith shook his head, eyes on the officer. Sorry, man. I'm not losing my license over this. He loaded his kit back into the van. I said nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Paper speaks louder than pride. Evan's volume climbed, but the authority had shifted. This isn't over. I'll take you to court. I'll drag this out for years. The second officer finally spoke, voice calm, practiced. That's your. But until you've got a judge's order in hand, you leave the locks alone. You can file whatever claims you want, but self-help eviction isn't legal in this state. The phrase hit like a gavel. Self-help eviction isn't legal. I watched Evan stumble over the words, trying to find footing. The swagger drained from him, like air from a punctured tire. I didn't raise my voice. I simply added one final line, measured, precise. You just tried to force entry on a house you don't own, with witnesses present, with an incident number on record. The lead officer scribbled in his notepad, tore off a slip, and handed it to Evan. Here's your case number. If you want to challenge ownership, take it to civil court. But as of today, she's the owner of record. That's the end of our involvement. Evan's jaw worked, opening and closing like a man searching for a comeback that wouldn't come. His friends shuffled, muttering excuses, drifting toward their truck. The locksmith pulled away without another word. For the first time in months, the porch felt steady beneath my boot. The house wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a position secured, defended not with shouting or fists, but with protocol and paperwork. Evan glared at me, eyes full of the fury of someone who had lost control. But behind him I saw the neighbors peeking from behind curtains, witness silent, watchful, and I knew what they'd seen. Not a squatter, not an interloper, the rightful owner standing calm, while the noise fell apart. I tucked the deed back into the folder, my voice steady as I looked at the officer. Thank you for keeping the peace. He nodded. That's what we're here for. And just like that, the reversal was complete. The porch incident didn't end with slammed doors and silence. It rippled. By nightfall, Evan had already turned to social media. He posted a furious update. Photo of the locksmith van cropped just right, captioned, "Unfair treatment. Family property stolen. Courts will fix this." The comments lit up with distant cousins, offering sympathy, people who hadn't set foot in Grandpa's house for years. For a moment it looked like he had the narrative, but paperwork doesn't scroll away, it sits, it waits. The very next morning, my attorney filed a notice of ownership in the probate docket, attaching the certified transfer on death deed, the recorder's index printout and Grandpa's notarized instructions. It was a clean package, date, time, signature. Evan's emergency petition to seize the house collapsed in its first hearing. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mr. Carter," he said, using Evan's last name, "this deed was validly executed and recorded before decedent's death. That transfers title by operation of law. Your claim is unsupported." Petition denied. Evan tried to argue, waved his unsigned draft again. The judge tapped the bench once. Firm, final. "Unsigned notes are not enforceable instruments. You will not attempt self-help eviction again, or this court will entertain sanctions." Sanction. The word landed like artillery. Word spread quickly. Neighbors who had watched the porch confrontation began waving again when I stepped outside. The woman across the street left a plate of cookies on the stoop, with a note, "He'd be proud of how you handled it." Family dynamics shifted too. At the next gathering, this time without Grandpa at the head of the table, there was a silence when Evan walked in. Nobody applauded his stories anymore. A few avoided eye contact. One aunt, who had parroted his claims about taking over, quietly pulled me aside in the kitchen. Her voice was low, almost embarrassed. "I didn't know he didn't have the papers. I'm sorry. You did right by Dad." I nodded. No lecture, no bitterness, just acknowledgement. Meanwhile, the official channels moved. Property tax rolls updated with my name. Utility accounts transferred seamlessly. A title insurance endorsement arrived in the mail, confirming I was sole owner. Each envelope, each stamp, another layer of armor. Evan kept pushing online. He threatened appeals, ranted about rigged systems, even hinted at showing up again. But every time he puffed his chest, the reality loomed larger. Law, not noise, had already chosen sides. And this time, it wasn't just me watching. The officer's report from that day was entered into record. The locksmith had given a written statement. Witnesses, neighbors and family alike, were subpoenaed and confirmed what happened on the porch. It was no longer a story told by one cousin against another. It was evidence, signed and sworn. I didn't have to gloat. I didn't have to raise my voice. Each filing, each ruling, each nod from a clerk or officer, was another reminder that discipline wins where arrogance fails. For Evan, the fallout wasn't just legal, it was reputational. His buddies stopped coming around. The contractor friend, who'd once offered to help remodel, refused to answer his calls. Even on social media, the likes and comments dwindled. Noise without proof fades fast. In the end, he wasn't punished by me, he was punished by the same system he underestimated. A system he thought he could bulldoze with swagger, only to learn that swagger doesn't hold up under oath. I spent those weeks quietly, keeping the house in order, filing what needed to be filed, mowing the lawn in the same straight lines Grandpa had taught me. I didn't celebrate, I didn't need to, because justice, when done correctly, doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives with a stamped page and a case number, and sometimes, that's louder than any gavel. The storm broke, and in its wake came quiet. Not the heavy silence of suspicion, not the tense hush of a family feud, but the steady calm of a house in order. The first step was procedural. I filed the affidavit of death with the county recorder, a single page that officially tied Grandpa's passing to the transfer already completed. Then came the practical adjustments. Homeowner's insurance updated, utilities shifted, property tax exemption filed, each envelope returned with my name typed cleanly at the top line. The law recognized me, the world recognized me. Inside the house, I set about my own work. The garage, Grandpa's domain, still smelled faintly of machine oil and sawdust. His machinist calipers, polished from decades of use, hung in their place. I climbed a short ladder and rehung them slightly higher on the pegboard, not as tools anymore, but as remind. Above them, I placed a small brass plate, engraved with his name, not for show, not for visitors, just for me. A private monument. Neighbors began stopping by, small gestures that meant more than words. Mrs. Jensen, from across the street, brought over a casserole. Mr. Alvarez, who used to wave at Grandpa during his morning flag routine, offered to help trim the hedges. Each visit ended the same way, a quiet handshake, a pause, then the unspoken recognition. Order had returned. Evan tried once more, of course. A letter arrived from his lawyer demanding voluntary vacatur and reasonable compensation for equity. My attorney replied, with 3 attachments: the recorded deed, the probate dismissal, and the officer's incident report. The response was only 3 sentences long. After that, nothing more arrived. Still, I didn't take chances. I posted a no trespass notice on the front door, filed with the sheriff's office, so it would stand as more than paper taped to glass. I left a voicemail on the family group line. The paperwork is fine. You're welcome to visit, but only with notice. Boundaries will be respected. I spoke evenly, no anger in my voice, just fact. It was the same discipline I'd learned in uniform: set the perimeter, define the rules of engagement, and then carry on. And carry on I did. I repaired the front steps myself, sanding down splinters, and repainting the rails. I replaced a leaking section of gutter along the back porch, keeping notes in a small spiral notebook, like Grandpa always had. It wasn't about the repairs themselves, it was about continuing the One afternoon, I returned a library book Grandpa had borrowed weeks before, a worn biography of Admiral Nimitz. The librarian scanned the return, paused, then looked at me. He was proud of you, you know, always mentioned how steady you were. Her words struck me harder than I expected, not because I needed them, but because in that moment, I realized the proof of who I was didn't come from Evan, or my parents, or even the courts. It came from the quiet testimony of people who had actually walked. At night, I'd sit on the porch where Grandpa once sat, the flag folded in a triangular case on the mantel inside. The cicadas hummed, the river breeze drifted in, and the house stood solid, anchored by the weight of its records. It wasn't victory I felt. It was something steadier, bound terms finally set, not by shouting matches or family theatrics, but by law, by order, by discipline. And as I locked the door each evening, I understood, this house was no longer contested ground. It was home. Some people think homes are claimed with volume, by shouting the loudest, or posturing the boldest. But I learned different. Homes are defended by paper, patience, and posture. Evan thought swagger was enough. He thought family politics and loud promises could erase months of caregiving, years of discipline. But paperwork doesn't blink. It doesn't care about who talks louder at the barbecue. It just stands, silent and stamped, until the noise burns out. I didn't win because I argued better. I didn't win
because I shoved back harder. I won because discipline means staying quiet until it matters, and then showing proof. That's the lesson I'll carry forward. Quiet doesn't mean weak, and respect doesn't come from who demands it. It comes from who earns it, calmly, with records to back them up. Have you ever seen someone underestimated until procedure set the record straight? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss the next echoes of revenge. We share a new story every day. In the end, it wasn't my voice that secured this house. It wasn't Evan's threats or his laughter that mattered. It was discipline. It was preparation, and it was proof. Paperwork quietly waiting for its moment. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to push him off the porch. The deed spoke for me, and in that silence, when the officer read the stamp and the seal, the truth became undeniable. Evan learned the same lesson so many before him have ignored. Arrogance fades, but records endure. That's what my grandfather taught me, that respect is never built on noise. It's built on consistency, on patience, and on keeping your affairs in order. So let me ask you, have you ever watched someone underestimated until the evidence proved them right? If this story hit home, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss tomorrow's echoes of revenge. Share this video with someone who knows the quiet strength of discipline, and check out the stories on screen now for more lessons in protocol, respect, and hidden strength. A new story arrives here every day.